The summons. No one expected the Galaxy Council chamber was a place of pride, power, and arrogance. Its walls rose high and glittered with stones mined from forgotten suns. Inside, leaders of countless species debated who should control what star system, who should send fleets to war, and who should be ignored for decades. Humanity was placed in the last category, ignored, dismissed, laughed at. The humans were seen as weak, primitive, too busy fighting among themselves to ever be trusted with interstellar responsibility. But on this day, everything began to change. The chamber was filled with tension. Alien voices clashed, wings buzzed, claws tapped against polished stone. The debate was about the looming invasion of the predator swarm. A ruthless species that had already consumed 4 entire star sectors, the swarm was unstoppable. Their numbers endless, their hunger without end. The council members shouted about defense lines, resource shortages, and who should be sacrificed. Some worlds would have to be abandoned, they said. Some fleets would have to be destroyed just to slow the swarm down, yet no one spoke of asking humans for help. They remembered Earth as a small blue world on the edge of the spiral arm. They remembered the endless wars, the fragile governments, the strange mix of kindness and brutality. To most of them, humans were not warriors. They were a species of noise, emotion, and unpredictability. But deep in the chamber's shadows, one representative stood. He was not tall, not strong, not covered in scales or armor like the others. He was a man, his suit simple, his eyes steady. He had waited long enough. "You speak of sacrifice," he said, his voice calm but cutting through the noise. "Yet you forget the ones who have lived with war longer than any of you. You forget the ones who know survival when all odds are against them. You forget Earth." The chamber grew silent. Claws stopped tapping. Wings folded. The alien leaders sneered. Some laughed outright. "Earth," one hissed. "You mean the backwater world that could not even unite itself until recently? What could they offer? Songs? Paintings? Weak soldiers who bleed at the first strike?" But the human did not answer with anger. He simply placed a small device on the center table. It flickered to life, projecting images, ships, but not like any the aliens had seen. Black-hulled, massive, their surfaces lined with weapons that glowed with restrained power. Their engines pulsed with a rhythm that felt alive. These were dreadnoughts, built in silence, tested in secret wars, prepared not for glory but for survival. "These are Earth's warriors," the man said quietly. "And they do not fight for politics. They fight because they must, and when they fight, they do not stop until the enemy is broken." A chill ran through the chamber. The aliens leaned closer, their eyes wide, their sensors capturing the scale, the size of the cannons, the raw brutality of the design. These ships were not made to intimidate, they were made to kill. The Council had ignored Earth for too long, but Earth had not been idle. Rumors had whispered through the trade routes. Tales of human fleets training in silence, human soldiers disappearing into hidden bases, human weapons tested on rogue pirates who never returned. Most dismissed them as legends. Now the truth was in front of them. "Why do you show us this?" another alien asked, his voice trembling. "You humans are not part of the Council. You do not command fleets. You do not hold sectors. What do you seek?" The man finally smiled, though it was not warm. It was the kind of smile that carried both warning and promise. "You sought to ignore us," he said. "But now the swarm comes, and when they come, we will not defend only ourselves. We will defend the galaxy, not because you asked, but because it must be done. And when the battle is over, when the swarm is broken, you will no longer laugh at Earth's warriors." The silence in the chamber was heavier than any shout. In the far distance, alarms began to ring across the galaxy. The swarm had crossed another defense line. Another fleet was burning. Worlds were screaming for help. The aliens turned to one another, desperate, fearful, uncertain, but their eyes kept returning to the human, to the images of the black dreadnoughts, to the thought of soldiers forged in wars that no one else could have survived. For the first time in the Council's history, Earth was not ignored, and deep within the cold silence of space, engines began to awaken. The day was coming when Earth's ultimate warriors would rise, and the galaxy would regret ever doubting them. The Black Fleet awakens far from the shining council chambers in the dark stretches of the outer rim. A fleet slept, hidden in the shadow of dead stars. Their hulls were black as night, their shapes like predators waiting for prey. These were Earth's ultimate warships, dreadnoughts built not for ceremony but for survival. Each one was a fortress. Each one carried weapons strong enough to shatter moons. Inside them lived soldiers who had trained in silence, hardened by endless drills, prepared for a war no one else believed would come. They called themselves guardians, not because they guarded planets of gold or power, but because they guarded the last hope of their species. When the call came from the Council, most of the galaxy thought humanity would remain silent. But inside the command halls of the hidden base, alarms thundered, red lights painted steel corridors, orders rang out, captains rushed to their bridges. Engineers powered the engines, soldiers strapped into armored suits. On one massive ship, the flagship of the fleet, a captain stood at the central console, his face calm, his voice steady. "The galaxy ignored us," he said. "They laughed when we built in secret. They mocked us when we trained for wars that did not exist. But now the swarm is here, and the Council has no answer." "We will be the answer," cheers erupted from the crew. Not loud and chaotic, but fierce and controlled. Like thunder rolled into discipline as the fleet prepared. Deep sensors picked up transmissions from across the galaxy. Desperate messages from burning worlds, cries for help from colonies abandoned by the Council. Fleets overwhelmed and torn apart, the swarm moved like a black wave, unstoppable, endless for the first time. Humanity did not watch from the sidelines. They moved. The black dreadnoughts lit their engines, and entire star systems trembled as the hidden fleet came alive. One by one, their cannons hummed with restrained power. Their shields pulsed with invisible strength. The aliens who had ignored Earth would soon witness something they had never imagined. But even among the humans, there was silence. Not out of fear, but out of understanding. They knew the cost. They knew many would not return, but none hesitated. For this was what they had been born into. A history written in fire and struggle. A will forged in centuries of surviving the impossible. Back in the Council chamber, panic spread. Reports arrived that another defense line had collapsed. Entire fleets had vanished into the swarm's jaws. Alien leaders argued again. Some demanded retreat, some demanded surrender. But then a voice cut through the noise, a signal that made every translator stop. "This is the Earth fleet," it said, calm, steady, without arrogance. "We are entering the war zone." A silence fell across the chamber. The counselors looked at one another, their eyes wide with disbelief. Earth had a fleet. And then the screen showed them. From the darkness of a dead star system, the dreadnoughts emerged, their black hulls reflecting no light, their weapons glowing like the breath of gods. Entire alien delegations leaned forward, jaws open, wings frozen mid-beat. Some whispered in fear, others in awe. These were not the weak ships they had imagined. These were beasts made for destruction by the stars. One elder whispered. They were preparing all along, but it was already too late for words. The human fleet was moving as the dreadnoughts crossed into swarm territory. The galaxy held its breath. Sensors across 100 worlds tuned in. Waiting, doubting, fearing, the swarm came. A black tide of bioships, endless, gnashing. Screaming through space, each one alive, each one hungry. They outnumbered the humans 100 to 1. Their claws and tentacles writhed as they charged, but the humans did not flinch. The command rang out, steady, almost calm. Fire. And the void lit up. Beams brighter than suns tore through the swarm. Missiles screamed into the dark and detonated with the force of small stars. Swarm ships ripped apart, burned, shattered. Yet more came, waves upon waves. The humans did not retreat. They advanced. Dreadnoughts moving in precise lines, their fire coordinated, their shields shimmering as claws struck and broke. The swarm expected chaos, but found only discipline. On every world watching, silence turned to gasps. Disbelief turned to awe. The galaxy had ignored Earth. But now, with each blast, with each swarm ship broken, it was clear. Earth had never been weak. Earth had been waiting. And as the swarm howled and burned, humanity's message was written across the stars. They would fight not for recognition, not for glory, but because when the galaxy called, they were the only ones who could answer, and soon the galaxy would regret ever doubting them. Fire in the void. The swarm had expected another easy hunt. They had devoured fleets larger than this before. They had consumed worlds that once thought themselves untouchable. Their ships were living nightmares, organic engines pumping like beating hearts, their claws tearing through steel like paper. But against the human fleet, something was different. The dreadnoughts did not scatter. They did not break formation. They moved like a single blade, cutting into the swarm's endless tide, missiles launched in waves, each one guided by artificial minds bred only for war. Beams of energy sliced through clusters of bioships, tearing them apart for every swarm ship destroyed. 10 more rushed forward, but the humans adapted. Their ships shifted tactics within seconds. Traps laid, false signals sent, ambushes sprung. Alien worlds across the galaxy watched in silence as human ingenuity unfolded in real time. No other species fought like this. The swarm relied on numbers, overwhelming everything in chaos, but the humans thrived in chaos. Inside the flagship, the captain stood steady. His eyes on the glowing tactical map, the swarm symbols flooded the screen. Overwhelming, endless, but he did not flinch. "Bring them in close," he ordered, his voice calm. "Make them believe we are trapped." The dreadnoughts slowed, their formation tightening, shields flaring under the relentless claws of the swarm. To an outsider, it looked like humanity was about to be swallowed whole. Council members watching leaned back in despair. One whispered, "They are finished. They cannot hold." But then it happened. The dreadnoughts split apart, peeling away in perfect timing, revealing hidden launch bays. Hundreds of smaller crafts burst out, fast attack ships armed with railguns and plasma blades. They sliced through the swarm from the inside, cutting into vulnerable joints and soft tissue. It was a slaughter. Explosions lit the void. Swarm shrieks echoed through comms. Black blood sprayed into the stars. Yet still the swarm pressed on, waves upon waves, driven by hunger that could not be reasoned with. Human losses began to mount. Ships broke apart. Soldiers screamed as compartments vented into the void. But no one retreated. Every fallen ship became a shield for the others. Every sacrifice calculated, every life traded for greater destruction. On one world watching the broadcast, an alien child asked her elder, "Why do the humans not run?" The elder whispered, voice trembling, "Because they do not know how." Hours passed like minutes. The battle burned across the void. The swarm numbers dropped, but so did the humans. Dreadnoughts cracked, weapons failed, yet the fleet kept moving forward. Inside one damaged ship, flames spread through corridors. Smoke filled the bridge. The crew fought on, blind, choking, but refusing to abandon their post. Their last act was to ram their burning hull into the swarm's largest leviathan, detonating their core, the explosion ripping the beast in half. On the council chamber screens, the blast lit every face. Silence filled the room. The galaxy had seen courage before, but not like this. Not this raw, relentless refusal to surrender. "They fight like mad creatures," one counselor whispered. But another corrected him, "No, they fight like survivors." As the hours stretched, the impossible began to happen. The swarm wavered. Their endless charge slowed. For the first time in centuries, they hesitated. The humans had done what no one else could. They made the swarm afraid, and across the stars whispers began to spread. Whispers of the Black Fleet, of the warriors who fought like fire itself. But inside the human fleet, there was no celebration. Only steady voices, constant orders, blood and sweat and silence. They knew this was only the beginning. The swarm would return, stronger, angrier, hungrier, and the galaxy would soon learn the truth. Earth had never been weak. Earth had never been blind. Earth had been waiting. And now that their warriors had risen, nothing would ever be the same again. When the galaxy watched in silence, the council chamber was drowning in panic. Alarms still echoed from distant fleets. Reports streamed in of burned colonies, broken ships, and vanished armies. Yet every screen was locked on one thing: the humans. For hours, the galaxy had watched them bleed, fight, adapt, and strike. The swarm's endless tide had met something it had never known before. Resistance that did not break, delegates whispered to one another, voices sharp. Some spoke in awe, others in fear, a few in anger. "They should not even be here," one hissed. "Earth was not invited into our fleets. They were never given command, and yet they command the battle," another replied quietly. "While we sit and argue, it was true. The galaxy's mighty armadas had crumbled one after another, walls of defense shattered like glass. Yet the humans, with fewer ships and fewer lives, were holding where others had failed. The swarm was changing, though, learning, adapting. Their organic forms shifted, their claws sharpened, their numbers still endless. They were not finished, not yet in the void. The human fleet pushed deeper, dreadnoughts cutting into the swarm's core. But each victory came with a cost. More black hulls cracked, more names lost to silence on the flagship bridge. The captain's face was shadowed by red lights, exhaustion in his eyes but fire in his voice. "They are adapting," an officer reported. "Their ships are reinforcing their armor. Our first strikes are less effective." The captain did not hesitate. "Then strike harder, closer, aim for their hearts. Not their claws." The humans shifted tactics again, their ships darting in ways the swarm did not expect. Every move precise, every decision sharp. From the council chamber, alien generals leaned forward, stunned. "They think like predators," one whispered. "They hunt the hunters." But then came the breaking point. The swarm's second wave arrived, larger, darker, hungrier, a living wall of death stretching across the stars. Entire alien delegations gasped. Some turned away in despair. "It is over," one leader cried. "No fleet can stand against that." But the humans did not flinch. The captain's voice rang across the fleet. Steady, calm, cold. "We do not retreat, we do not surrender. We advance." And the dreadnoughts surged forward. Straight into the jaws of death, the swarm screamed, claws tearing, fangs biting, ships shaking as shields strained to breaking. Explosions lit the void, but the humans kept firing. Kept cutting, kept moving. One dreadnought, its engines crippled, refused to fall back. Instead it turned, ramming headfirst into the swarm's living fortress, detonating its core, the shockwave tearing a hole through the swarm ranks. The council chamber gasped as the image burned into their screens. "Madness," one whispered. "Pure madness." "No," another said, voice heavy with awe. "Sacrifice." And as the swarm reeled from the blast, the humans pressed harder, turning loss into advantage, pain into power. For the first time, the swarm's endless hunger cracked. They faltered. They pulled back, just slightly but enough. The galaxy had never seen such a thing. Back in the chamber, silence stretched. Some delegates lowered their eyes in shame. Others clenched their fists in anger. For centuries they had ignored Earth, dismissed them as loud, chaotic, weak. Yet here in the void, Earth stood where no one else could. But shame turned to fear, and fear turned to whispers. "If they can do this to the swarm," one counselor muttered, "what could they do to us?" No answer came, but the thought lingered in every mind. The humans were not weak, not anymore, and they had built their strength in shadows, unseen, preparing, waiting. The captain's final words from the void rang across every screen, across every world, across every watching soul. "The swarm will not stop, but neither will we. Remember this day. Remember who stood when the galaxy fell silent. Remember Earth." And in that moment, the galaxy did for better or worse. They would never forget again. The final strike, the swarm stretched across the stars like a storm with no end. Even after hours of destruction, more waves came, endless, hungry. Alive with fury, the human fleet was battered. Dreadnoughts scarred, engines failing, hulls cracked. But they did not fall inside the flagship. The captain stood with calm eyes, his voice steady, though the deck trembled beneath his feet. "We have held them this long," he said. "Now we break them." His words traveled across the fleet to every soldier, every pilot, every engineer holding failing systems together with bleeding hands. "Earth has always been underestimated," his voice continued. "They thought we were weak, but weakness taught us to endure, and endurance taught us how to win. Today, the galaxy will remember us, not as the forgotten, not as the ignored, but as the ones who stood when all else fell, the dreadnoughts aligned, their weapons glowing brighter than suns. The last of their reserves poured into the cannons. But the swarm surged again, their largest leviathan pushing forward, its body like a living mountain of bone and claws, its roar shaking through comms across the void. The council chamber erupted in panic once more. Many leaders shouted for retreat, for surrender. Some closed their eyes, unwilling to watch the end. But the humans did not retreat. They advanced. The flagship moved to the front, its engines screaming, weapons charging beyond safe limits. The captain gave one final order. "Calm as ever! All ships, focus fire! Bring it down!" The void lit up in fire. Beams tore into the Leviathan. Missiles detonated in storms. Railguns ripped chunks of flesh and bone. The Leviathan struck back, claws raking across human ships, tearing dreadnoughts apart, shields shattered, flames spread. Still the humans pressed forward, even as their ships died. Even as their names vanished into silence, they pressed forward. One dreadnought, crippled and burning, locked its course straight into the Leviathan's chest. Its crew silent, unflinching, they detonated their core. The blast shaking half the sector. Tearing open the monster's armor, the flagship seized the moment, its cannon glowing brighter than a star. It fired, the beam tore through the Leviathan, splitting it in half. The explosion rippled across the swarm ranks. Their screams filled the void, confusion spreading through their endless tide. And then, for the first time in memory, the swarm broke. They pulled back, screeching, fleeing. The black tide retreating into the darkness of deep space. Across the galaxy, worlds watched in disbelief. The swarm was not invincible, they could be beaten. And it was the humans who had done it. The council chamber fell into silence. No laughter now, no sneers, no dismissive whispers, only wide eyes and heavy hearts. One elder finally spoke, voice trembling. "We ignored them, we mocked them, and yet they saved us." Another whispered. "If not for Earth, we would already be ash." Regret spread through the chamber like fire. But it was too late for apologies. The humans had not fought for the council. They had fought because it was necessary, because survival demanded it in the void. The surviving dreadnoughts drifted in silence, their black hulls scarred, their crews exhausted, but their heads held high on the flagship. The captain looked at the fading stars, his voice quiet. "We lost many, but we stood. And now the galaxy knows who we are." His words carried across the comms, across the council, across every world that had watched in silence. Earth was no longer the forgotten. Earth was no longer the weak. They were warriors, they were survivors, and the galaxy would never again dare to ignore them. For this was the day Earth's ultimate warriors rose from the shadows, and the galaxy would forever regret turning their eyes away.